management solutions in both the banking and insurance industries. We have a great presentation in store for you today, and it's jam-packed with a lot of valuable information on solutions to help you do better business. In return, it's going to enhance your customer satisfaction level. If at any time throughout the presentation you have a question, please type it into your chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We're going to try to get to all of the questions during the Q&A portion of this webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available online shortly after we conclude. Additionally, we're going to be having polling questions throughout the webinar so we can remain interactive. This is going to involve your cell phone, so if you can have your cell phone out and ready to go, that'd be great. So, next slide, please. So before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to review the agenda. Today, I'll begin with a brief introduction of our speakers, Michael Nishiki and Wally Bateau. Then Mike will talk about today's knowledge workers, some of the current market trends, and he'll give us an overview of case management. After that, Wally is going to talk about some of the common business pains that are seen in the banking industry. Then, during the day of the life of a customer service rep, he'll give you a walkthrough of one way to solve those business problems, which is case for SaaS. After the walkthrough, we'll have a Q&A session to wrap it up. Next slide, please. So here's our first polling question. Just to keep things interesting, if everyone could please get out your phone and participate, that would be great. We'll start off with a practice polling question. You'll need to type in a text or text the number in to 22333. So the question is, you drop your phone in a stinky toilet. What would you do? For fish it out and hope for the best, type 840120. For flush it, there'll be a new iPhone release soon. Type 840121. And for get someone to fish it out, because it's not yours, type 840122. We're going to give about 1 minute for this, because sometimes it takes a little time to get it started. See if we can get a couple of responses in it. Okay, so it looks like it's a tie so far between fish it out and hope for the best. One person would flush it because there's going to be a new iPhone soon. Okay, I'm going to give about 30 more seconds for this. Okay, so hopefully nobody's having problems with the texting in. If you are, go ahead and type a question over into the chat box. But it looks like some people are going to flush out and hope for the best. Me personally, I'm going to flush it because that's what my insurance is for on my iPhone, and I'm not all about sticking my hand in a dirty toilet. So moving on to the next slide. I'm going to introduce today's speakers. Today we have Michael Nishiki and Wally Bateau. Michael Nishiki is a Case Solutions leader and program manager at IBM's Information and Analytics and Enterprise Content Management branch. Michael leads the Case Solutions business in the U.S. West and Canada for the Information and Analytics segment, which is responsible for the strategy, development, and sales of insight-driven industry solutions. He joined IBM through the acquisition of FileNet, a leader in the enterprise content management, bringing more than 10 years of global and North American experience in business development and program management, working with clients to facilitate the design and implementation of comprehensive, integrated, and compliant solutions for highly regulated industries. We also have Wally Bateau. Wally Bateau is the Director of Pyramid Solutions, Software as a Service Division, specific to IBM Case Management Solutions. Wally is responsible for the worldwide strategy, development, marketing, and sales with a depth focus on delivering pre-built applications in the cloud, which are also customer deployable. Having his roots with FileNet Corporation as well as the business partner community, Wally brings 30 years of experience relative to enterprise content management, business process automation, and process re-engineering. Next slide. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening to the introductions. Now I'm going to pass it over to Michael so we can get to the exciting information we all need to hear. Michael? Michael, can you hear me? Looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, folks. Let's see if we can get Michael on the line. Michael, is your phone muted?
Can you guys hear me?
Now we can. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. All right. The dreaded mute button. Anyways, I was saying thank you, and this is Mike Nishiki, as mentioned. So the slide that you're seeing now is the big data challenge. For those that don't know what that means, it's a coined term that illustrates the challenges that we're dealing with today. I'll let you know that within the last few years alone, you've seen a number of things happening, right? We've got our smartphones. There's tons of business being transacted on the internet. Certainly a lot of websites that we, go to get information. And it can be anything from something mundane as, looking up a menu for a restaurant, as an example, right? We're very accustomed to getting that information. But believe it or not, for a lot of the businesses, they're seeing an enormous amount of information being generated, not just internally, but obviously externally. Everything from what people say about the company, what type of information is delivered to the company and exchanged with other individuals, collaboration. Those are all little bits of information that's being generated more than ever within the last few years. And a lot of that data, a lot of that information is very much unstructured. The type of narratives, the sentiment type of information, the contextual type of information is all considered unstructured. Next slide, please. Now, part of the challenges I was mentioning in that previous slide is that unstructured information is one thing. It is considered what we call dark data. But the dark data is something that is intangible in the terms of usefulness. It's hard to get insight from that. And it's exacerbated by the situation that you see here. Now, Joe, in this case, is just completely frustrated. All right, just a day in the life of what's going on in his workplace. And what he's jumping between is a number of different applications. And if you go around the clock, you can see, logging into different enterprise apps, being able to access just the calendars and email and messaging, external sites, any number of legacy systems. This has all been one of the #1 challenges that I have seen in the last 20 years. And like I said, information overload is one thing, but all of the legacy apps, as an example, through acquisitions and mergers, there's been difficulty in retiring some of these services and products that the companies have acquired come with these systems. So you can't retire these applications. And so, some of the challenges that you face there is, how much more time does it take to log in and out of maybe different applications, copying and pasting things back and forth between these different websites and different email parts. That, in and of itself, from a productivity perspective, is very frustrating. Okay? Next slide, please. did a study in collaboration with a company called AIM, and that's the Association for Image Management. And what they came back with from the results is that a lot of the work, the knowledge workers, and we saw the picture of Joe there being frustrated. One of the key things is that because of the nature of the type of work they do, the type of non-routine type of work, they turn to things like email. Email is probably the #1 area of usage. The problem with email is, from a regulatory perspective, from an audit perspective, very difficult to track, to understand the time and duration of each of the tasks that were performed using email. There's certain types of case-specific system workflows. So you can see the kind of the area there with the highest number of usage tends to be in the email and case-specific system workflows. ECM is an obvious fit because it's a very document-intensive type of work from that collaboration perspective. A lot of decisions are made, again, based on information that is not necessarily in a systems of record where it's considered structured data. The decision points are made based on information that's gathered through what we consider unstructured information. Also, as I described earlier, dark data. Next slide, please. So what we're finding is, and in terms of what I've seen as well, and this kind of actually validates that, there's a Harvard Business Review report on rethinking the decision factory, and the notion of a factory is that you crank out widgets, which is more about output. Okay, what knowledge workers need and actually perform is realization that we need to deal with outcomes. Okay. In a social services setting, keeping a family employed or keeping a family from losing their home is certainly an outcome. The output could be certain tasks that are performed to keep that family from being homeless, as an example. So we're seeing an increase in that, and you can see that this is about 40% of the U.S. workforce now, where the factory jobs are declining, and this is an indication that you see here in the graph. Next slide, please. And now it's time for another poll.
Time for another poll. So the question is, what are you currently doing to handle all of your unstructured content? You're going to go ahead and text to 22333 again. For nothing, we're living in the Stone Age here. Help us, please. Text 840123. For we tell our boss we're digital, but we're still using mostly paper processes. Text 840124. And for we currently have a digital strategy in place, text 840125. And see how long it takes. We got one. We currently have a digital strategy in place, which is great. And then nothing. Somebody needs some help out there. So I wonder how many actually tell their bosses that they're digital, but they're still using paper processes. Currently have a digital strategy in place, and nothing. We're living in the Stone Age here. We'll take about 15 more seconds. Once again, if you're having problems with the texting in, go ahead and type it in your chat box and ask for help. Oh, we got one that's telling their bosses that they're digital, but still mostly using paper processes. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and move on from there. Next slide, please. Michael, back to you. And we can't hear you, Michael. Are you on mute again, Michael? Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So one of the issues that we see with the knowledge workers is clearly, supporting them in the way that would make sense. And although, we talk about case management as if it were, something that's unique or new. Case management in general has been around for decades, right? But what's really interesting is that what we're finding is in this world is, going through automation, a lot of the areas that have not been automated is clearly in the area of knowledge work. And what we're finding is that knowledge work, being as complex and non-routine, is a perfect fit for case management to be able to solve. And as such, and this is a quote from Gartner here about casework being complex and non-routine, which is what was just mentioned, it also ties together the content management aspects of it, the people involved in either decision-making or tasks to be performed, and obviously the regulatory policies that have to be maintained from an audit control perspective, audit trail perspective, and like I said earlier, really to achieve an optimal outcome, not just an output, all right? So one of the things they talk about is a spectrum of different processes, and what they've tried to do is given from the far left, where something is extremely automated and straight through as much as possible, to something that is more collaborative and more resource intensive. And so what you're seeing is that case management is in that spectrum. But what you also see in the blue italics is that there's potential for case handling there as well. So what we're seeing is every time I'm talking to the customers now in terms of what their issues are, it's becoming very interesting just to find out that case management is actually very pervasive across all of these areas. And what we have to understand is that because of the information-intensive world that we live in, and as I mentioned earlier in the slides, it's obvious to us that the information that is coming in, the big data problem, is definitely exacerbating the situation and is absolutely requiring a need for case management type solutions. Next slide. This is further supported through Forrester, where they call it dynamic case management to help differentiate from those decades of what we considered case management. And so the new term is dynamic case management. It can be advanced case management. But the point is that what we considered the old case management was more of a disparate component of an overall solution. You would end up buying different point solutions for managing your content. You would buy different point solutions for your analytics to help you, with your business and be able to visibly see what's going on. Different technologies for user experience, different technologies for business process management. What Forrester is saying is really what is needed now from a dynamic case management is the ability to bring all these together in an integrated and embedded capabilities to really support knowledge work. Knowledge work is floating between all these areas, and because of this disparate nature of it, if it's not properly integrated, causes even more problems than what you just saw with Joe in the previous slide. Next slide, please. Again, going back to the AIM report, based on the survey, more than 60% of those respondents saw that the processes, in fact, did involve case-type work. Some examples tend to be things like incident management, or just service requests. Might be a freedom of information type of service request. It might be in terms of fraud. Fraud can be very intensive in terms of bringing together and collecting information in a case file and making decisions on that case. So those are examples, and what we're seeing is that because the automation has left a gap in solutions to address this, this is one of the key focuses that IBM has looked at, and this is one area that we believe it has the most growth. given that, in terms of the marketplace view, we also find that, case management, okay, yeah, that's in healthcare and that's maybe in legal, right? Decades ago. As I mentioned earlier, we're finding it very pervasive because of this information overload, okay? A lot of the complexity is actually found in different areas that one never would have expected. You can see in the survey, from AIM, project management. Never would have thought of that, but if you think about it, it's, the documentation that's required. Sometimes if you're working with external vendors, there might be milestones to pay. You have to have documents submitted to be able to pay, and if you don't, because of compliance reasons, you might be in, basically audit issues there. The contract and bid management, the help desk, that seems to be obvious. I mentioned incident management. Those are things, and then also customer dispute resolution. How fast can you do it where the outcome is, actually good, and you're retaining that customer. Okay, so this is just examples, but we're finding that to be the case of, predominantly in almost every industry. There's every aspect of where they need case type work solutions. Next slide, please. And it's time for another poll.
Okay, time for another polling question. So for this one, you're going to text 840126, and then your answer directly after that to the number 22333. And the question is, what process of yours do you feel Case Manager would enhance? So, for example, in banking, this might be your covenant review or your loan origination process, possibly your customer service. Wally, what processes are you currently seeing?
Well, I think you named a couple of them. We also see, wealth management being one, new account opening. All of those tend to lend itself well to how Michael described what case management is, which is a lot of collaboration with a lot of unstructured processes to it on top of a process itself. So, that combination lends itself well to many of the different, applications we find in the banking financial world.
And there's one I guess we didn't mention, customer onboarding just came up. So I'm going to go ahead and assume we're talking about as well as account opening there, probably in banking, maybe some HR processes as well, accounts receivable maybe even. Okay, and if that's all, we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide. Thanks, Wally. Back to you, Michael.
Great, thank you. So as I said, IBM realized that there's definitely growth out there for a solution such as this, and we actually came out with a product called IBM Case Manager. And some of the things that do, the obvious thing is, the first thing we have to do is support the knowledge work. So you can see that there in number one. But also provide the information to help improve those decisions. Now, like I said earlier, information can be in a systems of record, what we call a structured information, where they're in rows and columns. Certainly, we're used to seeing that. Banking systems have it, CRM systems have it. The point is that it's not just the structured information to help improve those decisions. It's also that dark data that I mentioned. It's that intangibles that are often missed, and it's maybe the narrative in the customer service record. It might be documents that are sent through email or documents that are submitted in other means. Those just help in making those decisions. It's a richer amount of information that you can get. But fundamentally, we want to make sure that information is disseminated to the knowledge worker in such a way that it's in context. We just don't want to flood their screen full of information that has no relevance to the kind of work they're doing. So we're definitely trying to enhance that case outcome. In other words, if it's for customer service, for example, in wealth management, let's say for FINRA regulations, you have to make sure that you're collecting all of the interactions that you have with between broker and client, and you want to make sure that everything is there for a proper transaction. Well, the transaction is certainly an outcome, but you want to make sure that the other outcome is that you're compliant, right? So there's a couple of things. It's not a single outcome per se, but it could be multiple outcomes. But you have to set a goal. It might be a service level agreement goal. It might be a key performance indicator goal. Certainly it can be achieved, but you want other kinds of outcomes in that. It might be customer retention, other things that relate to what your business is most interested in. Okay, and then fundamentally, what IBM Case Manager is able to do more so than any other solution is that it enables the businesses to take control. And what do I mean by that? A lot of situations with case management in the past is, you get what you get. All right. The processes are fixed. It's not flexible. The UI, the user interface is such that it's not exactly to our liking. I can't seem to get the information I need, so I need additional help. And so you're going back to IT, right? You're going back to information technology developers to enhance the application, enhance the system for case management, whatever it is. What Case Manager is able to do is help you design and deploy solutions very quickly, give great feedback from the lines of businesses in terms of what they need to have, what they want to have, and keep consistently within the guidelines of what you need to do from a regulatory perspective, which is all the other things that we saw earlier. But the business can take control, literally, while working with the solution. And things like tasking that doesn't have to be predefined. They can decide on their own. I need to create a new task. So it's very fluid, very flexible, and it gives the business a sense of ownership over what they're trying to control. Next slide, please. So to further emphasize supporting the way knowledge workers work is, as I mentioned before, it's a very decision-intensive content that supports a lot of that decision-making, that dark data that I mentioned. It's a lot of that dynamic and unpredictable work, the non-routine work. All of a sudden it's like when you ask somebody, explain to me what your flow of work is. Okay, well, it kind of depends. It depends on what the customer says, it depends on the situation. It's not something that you can draw on a piece of paper and say, this is always the case. Okay, that's non-routine, right? It ends up being that way. And it becomes what we call ad hoc task. Okay, depending on the situation, it's going to be this. Today it's going to be task 1, 2, and 3. Tomorrow it might be task 3, 2, and 1. It just depends, right? And then collaboratively. One of the key things about knowledge workers is that there's a lot of information in their heads, which we call tacit knowledge. A lot of it tends to be something that you'd love to be able to codify and put into some form of rules or guidelines or things like that. You write documentation. You ask the knowledge workers, please document your best practices. And what happens is that that's great for the time, but all of a sudden, things change because of the circumstances of your customer, and then it's back to tacit knowledge inside the person's head. Well, you need the ability to go and reach out to other subject matter experts within your enterprise. That's then a capability that you look for in supporting the way knowledge workers work. And then fundamentally, you want guardrails. You want the rules, and you want those enterprise processes where it makes sense, where you need the automation. You need that ability to keep the constraints in there so that it's just enough so that you stay compliant, just enough so that you can pass the audits. Okay, next slide. So in terms of that focus on the case outcomes, it's about a goal, right? All the aspects that we just talked about in terms of supporting the knowledge worker is fundamental to a case outcome. Visibility at the case level, whether you're the actual knowledge worker or the supervisor or the executive, patterns across cases, what are you seeing longitudinally? Can we do the analytics across all the cases and then decide that maybe there's some fraud? Maybe there's some opportunities for new services from a product development perspective. Maybe it's an opportunity to improve customer service and, again, collect that what would have been tacit knowledge and take it as explicit knowledge and codify it so that we can basically have the future guidelines in place. The dashboards and reporting, absolutely, the same concepts from a visibility perspective, but more at a larger percentage of the information across the what we're actually working on, as opposed to going down to the case level. But you have the ability to drill down all the way to the case level. So you may have the dashboard in terms of the nice little dials moving around, and all the SLA thresholds, and you see things bouncing back and forth. But you want to be able to double-click that and be able to get down to the case level. Insights from content. Natural language processing. Interesting concept. What if you had a customer service record where they have certain comments that were made? What if it's a social blog? What if it's Facebook? Okay, natural language processing is something that is also allowing us to get more insights from that quote-unquote dark data. You can take it beyond just context, beyond just having a punctuation that changes the context, but also the sentiment. It might be colloquial terms like, this is sick. A teenager might be talking about something that is actually good, but in their way they're saying that it's hard to determine. You have the ability to say, this is a thumbs up, this is good. All right. Then you can put that into your feedback in terms of, do you make improvements or are you doing okay? And then again, like I said, from collecting, the knowledge gained longitudinally is now we can formulate better guidance or recommendations for successful outcomes. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Wally.
All right, thanks, Michael. So I'd like to move us from trends and features, functions, and technology to how technology really addresses real pain points. And although we mentioned a number of really good solutions where cases have fit in the banking world, I figured I'd take one that's a little bit simpler, I think, to comprehend, which is a day in the life of a customer dispute process. And the way I'd like to start it is going back to the frustrated worker, Joe. So I'm going to play Joe in this example, and I want to kind of explain the pain points of a dispute process at a high level, and then actually take you through the day in the life to address those. Ultimately, we're trying to keep our customers, make them happy, don't have attrition that creates issues, be able to address problems before they happen, to stop first calls, or when calls do come in, to be able to resolve them immediately. So when I look at an example dispute, they all typically start with maybe a phone call, an email, maybe a piece of correspondence, something gets generated that creates a case. And in the current world, that might be something, again, either an email or a paper note that starts an investigation process. And that investigation likely will require some follow-up, and maybe I need to put this to the side and wait for some other information to come in from a branch agent or a customer themselves. And once that information comes back into the organization, it needs to be matched up with who requested it. And then I might collaborate with one or many parties. In this example, I'll be collaborating with account services. I may require to escalate it to my supervisor to ultimately resolve that particular dispute. So from Joe's perspective, I have some pain points. Everything is manual. It's all decentralized. I move things around physically. And again, that might be email, but the point being is anytime I'm passing control over to someone else to follow up and do some investigation, I'm losing that ownership of that dispute, which I could also likely forget about, and something else might trigger me, like another follow-on call from the customer. There's a lot of manual searching that I need to go through across those multiple systems, as you saw the frustrated Joe worker. And as Joe, I lack really control and visibility, and more importantly, my manager lacks the visibility to actually see what disputes are coming in. Is there any type of repetition from certain customers? Is there some type of pattern related to a particular dispute we need to address? All those things are not visible. So I have a number of customer pains. So what I'd like to do, again, is take you through the day in the life of Joe, the CSR rep, and what I do to now actually manage disputes. But before we do that.
Another polling question. So we hear a lot about the cloud nowadays. So we were wondering if you have ever considered moving your business processes into the cloud. So if you have, and that's really all you talk about this year, go ahead and text 840127. If you're kind of just doing your homework, just starting to plan, and you think you're going to start doing things in 2015, text 840128. If you're still really not sure about it, and you might have mentioned it, but you don't really have any current plans, go ahead and text 840-129. And if you're not really sure, what the cloud is, you hear these words like PaaS and SaaS and LaaS, and you just don't know what they are, go ahead and text 840-130. And it looks like some people are talking about it this year. They're going to get implementing. So I'd be curious to know where they're looking to do that. So maybe if you're comfortable in chatting that over to us, we might be able to help you out there. Looks like some people are just doing their homework on it, and some are just mentioning it but don't have any current plans. Okay. So with that, Wally, we can go ahead and go to the next slide.
Okay, terrific. So I am now Joe, the CSR rep, and this is my starting point every day. I sit down with my cup of Joe, and I sit in front of my workstation, and what's in front of me is a number of cases that have already been established. So I really have two options when I start my day. I can either go in and open an existing case, or I can go in and add a new case. In this example, I would enter in all the customer demographics, maybe add some documents or emails to the case. That would be my starting point. So whether it's an existing or a net new case, it brings me to a particular user interface that gives me an entire view of the case. So as Joe, the first thing I'm looking at is what we call our customer status bar. And this particular status bar is telling me two things. One is that this is an open case, signified by the open folder. It also signifies something to do with money, maybe a refund. And again, there's any number of icons can be used and associated to any of the properties of the case to help visualize what this case pertains to before I even start to dig into it. So I already know something about this case before I get started. The next thing I'm looking at is all the demographic area. Who's the customer? What is this problem pertaining to? How do I contact that particular customer? Next, I can look at the tasks that have been completed or are actionable. So again, as the dispute owner, I can see all the cases that are out there. I can create new tasks. I can actually perform actions against those tasks, meaning I can complete them and remove them. And I can certainly see the entire view of everything that's happening related to this particular dispute, which is important. Should I receive a phone call from the customer, I'm able to answer those accordingly. I also can go to my Documents tab, and this is where we have a centralized view of all the documents that are associated to this particular case. And documents is a general term. It could be certainly scanned documents. It could be Microsoft Office content. It could be audio files, video files, emails. Any of those things can be placed within this case for reference. And then finally, I have an area that's called my relationships. So I can create related cases based on looking at other potential cases that may have been completed. So as Joe, I may decide to look up for the same type of dispute for the same particular customer, and if I see some, I can just explicitly relate it to this case so I can reference it going forward to see if there's trends or patterns. And certainly any of the other people I collaborate with can also see the fact that there's a particular customer that may have continual types of disputes over time, and we have handled them in certain ways historically. So now I've had a complete view. I've seen the case status, I've seen the properties related to the demographics, I can look at the content, I can see the tasks, I can see related cases. Now I need to perform some type of action. So typically one of three things will occur. I'll either close it, I may have answered the question, sent out a form letter, email, follow-up phone call. I may put it on hold, and we have some powerful hold functionality that allows this Joe, the CSR rep, to put this on hold or push it off to the side, awaiting certain things to happen. And this could be any combination of documents that need to come in, so once they arrive, they can pull this off of hold, or it could be some tasks that need to be exercised, or the combination thereof before it's returned back to me. And then the last process would be actually to create new tasks. And so what I'm going to do as Joe, the CSR rep, is I'm going to put a comment in here. Perhaps this has got to do with a money level that's higher than my authority, so I'll put in some type of a comment. I'll then create a new task. In this case, I have 3 different supporting tasks I can invoke, one being to my supervisor, So I'm going to go ahead and simply comment it and launch a task, waiting for my supervisor to finish. I'm done with that dispute. I still have a complete view if I need to go back to it, and I move on to the next case. So that was kind of a simple perspective of the day in the life, moving from beginning to end on handling a dispute. What I'd like to take you through now is a little of the user configurability. What's the UI made of, user interface? And it first is made up of a number of in-baskets. And by default, there are some in-baskets that allow you to see cases with my work, Joe's work. I could see all cases based on my security level. I also have the ability, as Joe, the CSR, to create in-baskets. And in-baskets are views into my workload, so I can determine how I want to find information and how I want it to be presented to me through a user-defined in-basket. I also have the ability to perform user configurable reporting, so I can select which properties I want to do some reports on and in what type of manner by which I want to depict that particular report. So what I'm going to do here is go through what's called find cases. So I can go and explicitly find a case based on some criteria, and one or many columns can show, or properties can show, so I can show all the properties of the case and search against those properties. In this case, maybe I don't know the entire field value, so I can put partial information in to go find it. I can also go out there and do a very specific search, and if I'm doing this on a daily basis, I would actually save that. So I might create a customer dispute in basket that focus on certain types of disputes, and that's my focus. Maybe that's my specialty. Maybe I'm focused on certain customers. So again, not only can we do explicit searches, we can also save those searches, and not only the manner by which we filter into the work in basket, but also what information is depicted. So I can very easily move columns to the right that are important to me that I want to see when I click on that particular user-defined in-basket. So things like, the customer's name and contact information, or what's the dispute type, those might all be important things to me to see before I go ahead and select it. And as Joe, I simply go ahead and save it by role or by user, and it's now available to me for continual usage. And I can go to those every day. I can remove them as necessary, but it gives me some ability to make the system work in the manner by which I like to find my work. Now this becomes very powerful from Joe's manager's perspective. So Joe's manager can come in, one, potentially create a quick report. So in this very easy example, we have a number of customers by first name here, and we can see that Bob has got quite a few disputes, far more than the others. The manager may decide to reprioritize and basically go through that same process, create a filter, customer name equals Bob, and which columns of information should be exposed, save it by role, and the standard order processing for this particular customer is to always work off of role in baskets first. So that's a very nice, simple mechanism for the management and supervisors to go out and create prioritization for all of their CSR reps. So let's move from kind of the end user, from Joe's perspective, Joe's manager, to how do we administer the application. And so if I am the administrator, I have a button that allows me to go in and make modifications to generate the business slant that makes sense for me. So although we have a number of pre-built solutions, we also understand that one size does not fit all. And as such, we need to provide configurability for the customers to go ahead and make those changes. So once clicked, we can see that the user interface for administration comes up. This particular customer only has one solution. They could have many, but one solution, which is the customer dispute or complaint. And what I'm going to do is jump down to the storyline. And the storyline really provides two components. One, it is your documentation about your solution. And two, it's interactive in nature, meaning that I can, as the business owner, go in and make changes in areas where we allow you to change, and that will change the behavior of the solution and the user interface. So examples, if I scroll down into the storyline, there's an area where all the properties or the details of those properties exist. And we've created a number of properties for our pre-built application, and perhaps the naming convention doesn't quite fit. Simple example, we don't use customer account, we use customer number. In fact, we use the pound sign. So I can simply make a change to that. I can scroll down some more, and in this case I can see that We use things like subject matter expert or SME. The customer uses legal as an example, so they want legal to be a part of the process or a role, and they also want to create one for their executives. There's also the ability to go and modify the tasks that you can actually invoke. So I go ahead and make those particular changes. I can then go into our role memberships, which allows me to create users. So I would add the users for my legal team and for my executives. I would then simply assign those users to the appropriate role that they address, and I save and publish those changes, and I'm off and running. And that immediately changes the behavior of the user interface once that's been published.
So it looks like it's time for another poll. So in this poll, we want to know what you just heard about that you find the most valuable. So if you find the status bar visual the most valuable, you like seeing, immediately being able to see via icons what's going on within your customer dispute or your covenant review or your loan origination, go ahead and text 840131. If you like that you can see everything in one place in a centralized view called the holistic view, go ahead and text 840132. If you like that it's configurable by the user, go ahead and type 840133. If you like that the solution itself, the roles, the properties, and the tasks are configurable, go ahead and text 840134. And if none of the above sound very useful to you, go ahead and text 840135. It looks like the holistic view is a clear winner over here, as well as user configurability. So if we don't have any more coming in, we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide, Wally.
Okay, thanks. So how do we get started? Let's address the deployment aspect, and what is our starting point? So in this case, there's the concept of a solution store. So here you can see a number of solutions that are available, one being the customer complaints. We'll continue to add solutions to the store based on customer input. One of the solutions I'll talk about before we get started is the Quick Start template. We've defined that particular template specifically in the cases where those solutions the customers are looking for do not exist. The Quick Start template is a blank slate. It allows you to create the application du jour, app of the day, and allows you to go in, create all of your own properties, your own roles, your own tasks, and ultimately deploy that solution all without any professional services. In this case, since we started with disputes or complaints, let's go ahead and select the solution. So from the solution store, we would select that. We would get that same kind of storyboard effect, so I can read about this particular solution. And if it's something that's of interest, I can simply select it now for solution deployment. So in this manner, what we're providing is an account creation that basically establishes a multi-tenant environment. So for those interested in a public cloud, it's a secured environment where all the different solutions for that customer are kept together. All the information relative to who's the administrator and who's the registrar, all the assets for those solutions are bundled up and pushed into their secured area in the cloud. Keep in mind that this same concept could be done on an on-premise situation in more of a shared services environment where you can do the same concept and keep it within your four walls. Within just a couple of minutes, the solution is deployed and it's ready to be launched. So you'll get a launch solution link, and it'll bring you to a user interface as a starting point. And in this case, because it's a brand new solution, there's no cases. There's no user in baskets defined. You're starting with your blank slate. And right from here, you can just start adding cases, creating your own in baskets, etc., and you're off and running. So to start to sum it up, what really Case for SaaS is providing is pulling together three big components, one being all the power of IBM Case Manager, as Michael went through. Leveraging cloud computing, which is really offloading, your IT shop, not having to worry about hardware infrastructure, maintenance, upgrades, all those things that are typical in an IT organization, and blending that with the expertise that Pyramid brings in deploying Case and creating real solutions all into a pre-built software as a service component. And when you think about the immediacy, comparing typical deployments, regardless of whether it's Case Manager or any other type of project, it typically takes months to maybe a year or more. We've done the same thing here with Case Management Solutions and taken a 3-month+ deployment down to just a couple of minutes, where now you're able to see immediate value, start to use this solution, start to see your ROI, make changes on the fly, so you're very agile in terms of making changes in kind of rinse and repeat scenario, and you're off and running. And certainly, we can extend any of these solutions as far and as deep and as complex as need be, but out of the box, we feel there's quite a bit of power and flexibility. So to sum it up from Joe's perspective, the hope is not only Joe, but the customer now feels like they are the bank is able to deal with their customers in a much better manner. They're able to solve problems faster. They're able to look at trends and hopefully fix the core of the problem versus reacting to disputes themselves. And because there's that single dispute owner, there's a better, more efficient process, and we're able to close the loop, handle first call resolution rates, and we provide you with administrative capability, as I mentioned, so that you're agile as your market changes, as your company changes, as people come and go and roles may change. You can certainly make those changes accordingly. And because it's all based on a per-user utility pricing model, it's a very predictable return on investment based on the expense structure. So with that, I think we're going to open it up to the questions. You can find more information about Pyramid Solutions at case4solutions.com or at pyramidsolutions.com. But what I'd like to do is take a look and see what kind of questions that may be out there. A couple have come in. And let's see, the first one, I think, Michael, I'm going to take this one. It says, can you talk more about a shared services model? So one of the things that we're seeing, for customers who might not be cloud ready, who might have already a digital strategy in place, but they're looking at really trying to provide an offering to all of their constituents, to all their departments in the organization. In many cases, we see focus on just the lifeblood applications, like loan origination, as an example, and some of the other ancillary departments are kind of left in the cold. Providing a shared services model or a application solutions store now allows each of those departments to begin to control their own destiny. So that's what we've been hearing from our customers, is looking for the ability to really control it themselves, not be dependent on IT or a third-party vendor, and to really gain the benefit of what case management provides at a low cost and on a short-term effort. Another question, and I think, Michael, this hopefully you can handle, so you can take off the mute. It says, why can't I do this in our CRM, our Customer Relationship Management System? Michael, you're still on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good question. CRM systems, and I think I mentioned very early on that a lot of the non-routine work in CRM systems tend to be problematic for these systems. And the challenge is that if you have a structured way of handling customers, scripts and that kind of thing, that's perfectly fine. But what we're finding, and this is what I was saying about the trends, is that the amount of information that tends to be needed to make a decision in terms of if it's disputes, what's the outcome of that dispute, but you have to collect that information. We're finding that this disparity between the collecting and then tying that back to the CRM system of record in terms of the customer data. All the different tie-ins is effectively somehow lost at some point. And when you step back a moment and you look at, when I look at it from an audit perspective, what must you do to go back and look at the history and of the tasks performed and the documents collected, decisions made, let alone just the customer data that may have been updated. the propensity to have a lot more mistakes along the way tends to happen, right? And that's exacerbated by the amount of information that we're taking in, right? And we're seeing a greater emphasis on customer experience, retaining customers, and those kinds of things. Primary reason why a lot of companies are looking to augment their CRM systems with case management, and a lot of reasons why I spend a lot of time talking about CRM systems. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I think we have time for one more. This is a little general. It says, can you explain platform as a service versus software as a service and public cloud versus private cloud? So I guess I'll go ahead and address that. When we think of, actually it kind of starts with infrastructure as a service, which is really just kind of the physical hardware where you need to load all your applications or all your software by which you then create a platform. And once you've created this platform like Case Manager, now you need to configure and or custom a particular application, which is where you get software as a service. So what we're looking at here is taking the platform as a service from IBM, which is Case Manager, and adding our solutions on top of that, which then creates it a software as a service, which allows you, the customer, to readily select and deploy solutions, make use of them, and turn around and go back and make changes as often as necessary as needed. So that's really the big difference. It's taking a platform and really creating solutions that meet the needs of Joe, the CSR rep, so that you're actually making use of technology. When you look at public versus private cloud, public cloud is really what's called a multi-tenant environment. So ultimately what's happening is there's a sharing of resources up in the cloud, be it physical hardware, software, and things of that nature, such that the economies of scale gained there is passed on to the customer by a lower cost of entry. So you're sharing space in a very secure environment. You can't see anyone else's information. Everything's very much separated, but you are sharing some resources, both hardware and software-wise, versus what a private cloud is actually something that's viewed as an on-premise deployment, but similar in nature, where it could be hosted by someone else. It's almost a kind of a shared services model I talked about earlier, where again it's a very contained hardware software solution that can be managed by someone else, but the customer is gaining the benefit of not only the solution, but also potentially they wanted to make sure it stayed within the four walls of their organization. So with that, Anna, I think we've run out of time, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Wally. And again, thank you everybody else for joining us today. Again, my name's Anna Goldsworthy, and my contact information is right there on the screen. If you have any further questions or would like to chat a little bit further, you can go ahead and call me at 248-686-5803 or give Wally a call at 702-498-2470. Additionally, we are recording today, so if you'd like a copy of the webinar, you can go online to case4solutions.com, and it should be available within 1 to 2 business days. Or go ahead and email me at agoldsworthy@pyramidsolutions.com, and I'll make sure you get a copy of that. So thank you everybody for coming, and have a great rest of your day.